Hello, Miguel from Grumo here, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to create a paywall to charge for access to your application using Glide. So here I have an example of the final mobile app, and basically we're going to charge to access articles. And what we're going to do first is we're going to allow people to access up to 3 articles for free, and on the 4th one, they'll be taken to a paywall where they have to choose a pay plan. So this is how it works. Let's say that I just logged in and I am a non-paid user and I can look at all the different articles, but I'm going to click on one article. I'm going to read it. I'm going to click on a second article. I'm going to read it. I'm going to click on a third article, read it. And on the 4th article, I'm taking to an upgrade page where there are 3 paid plans that I can choose from, and then I can buy them. Once I pay for the plan, I'll have access for whichever amount of time I paid for, in this case, 1 month. When the month of access expires, I will be taken again to the upgrade page. So now let's pretend that I'm logged in as somebody that paid, but whose subscription has expired. So I'm gonna do that right now, paid and expired type of user. So I click on any of the articles and I'll be taken to the paywall. And then it says your access has expired and the date that it has expired. And again, I have to upgrade in order to continue to have access. All right, so we're going to build this all from scratch. Let's do it. The first thing we're going to do is create the Google Sheet. In this case, the Google Sheet has 4 tabs: users, articles, plans, and an admin tab. Under the users tables, there's 4 users: an administrator, a non-paid user, a paid user, and a paid expired user, which we will use to test the different levels of access to the app based on whether the user has paid or not. Then we have 10 different articles that we're going to restrict access to, and then we have 3 different paid plans. And finally, we have an administration tab where we're going to set the amount of free articles that are available for new users. Once we've created this Google Sheet, we can go ahead and create our app inside Glide. So we go to our Glide dashboard, click on New Project, then enter the name of the project, select Glide App, continue. We're going to select the source Google Sheets in this case, but you also could do it with Glide Tables or Excel or Airtable, or in the future more data sources. But in this case, it's going to be Google Sheets. Continue. We're going to select our Google Sheet, which is going to be called Glide Paywall. And now Glide is going to attempt to create a mobile app based on this Google Sheet. So by default, every single table inside the Google Sheet becomes a tab or a screen inside our mobile app. Of course, this is not exactly the way we want it to look like. So for this app, we only need one tab, which is going to be the articles tab. So we can delete the other tabs. I'm going to delete that tab and I'm going to delete the paid plans. Actually, the paid plans is going to go under the sandwich menu there. Okay, so it would appear here, and that's going to be our upgrade page. Then the administration dashboard or tab can go here too, and only admins are going to be able to see it. Now we can change a little bit how things look like, and let's just make this, let's say, orange, and the app info is going to be Glide Paywall by Grumo, and we could say this is an app to test paywalls. Okay. And maybe the logo, which is gonna make this into a $sign. All right, okie dokie. Now we can change a little bit the look here of the main articles, and we can click here and make this into cards. And let's make the description 2 lines, and then basically we have the app already. We have 10 articles, and people can start reading them. But of course, now everybody can read all the articles. So we want to restrict how many articles people can read for free. And then we want to take them to the upgrade page. And once they pay, they'll be able to access all the articles. Okay? So we need to store how many times somebody reads an article. In this case, we're going to count how many times somebody clicks on an article, and we're going to assume that clicking on an article means reading the article. So we need to count this. For that, we need a column under the users table to store the number of times somebody has clicked on an article. So we go to our Glide data editor, and under users, we can add a new column, a numeric column that is going to store the number of read articles. So we're going to call these read articles, and we're going to say it's a column type number with no decimals, and no group separator. And here's where we're going to be storing the number of articles that have been read. Now we have to compare this with the number of maximum articles that somebody can read in order to see if they've run out of free articles or not. Now the maximum number of articles is stored under the admin table, and we can see here it says free articles 3. Okay, so we have to pull that number, the maximum free articles, into the users table, and the way we're going to do that is by creating a single value column. We're going to call this max free articles, and we're going to use a single value computed column where we're going to get the first value of the table admin for the column free articles, and you can see now we pull the number 3. So now we can compare max free articles with read articles, and based on that we can figure out if they run out of free articles or not. So we're going to create now a conditional column to compare the max free articles with the read articles. So let's say has free articles left. Okay, 1 is going to be yes, 0 is going to be no, and we're going to use the conditional computed column. We're going to compare the number of articles the user has read here, as in read articles, and it has to be less than, so less than the maximum free allowed articles. And if that is true, then the user still has free articles left, and that's going to be a 1, otherwise it's going to be a 0. Okay, and now it always says a 0, which is not true, because in theory they should have 3 articles by default. And the reason why is because the value of the read article by default, the default value is empty, and that is so that it's not computing properly. So what we have to do is create a conditional column again. So let's just duplicate this, and we're going to call this read if, and basically we're going to convert anything that is empty under the read article. So if a read articles is empty, we're going to say that the value is 0, otherwise the value is going to be read articles. It's just a way of forcing a 0 when the value is empty by default when they start using the app, right? So now we're going to do the comparison here, grabbing the read if, so edit, and we're going to grab the read if, okay? And now, yes, all the new users that haven't read any articles, they're going to have still a value of 1, saying that they still have articles free to be read. And if I were to change the value to say 3 for the second user, guess what happens? Now the value of has free articles is 0, which means this user has run out of free articles. If it was 2, they still have access, right? Okay. Now the next step is to store the value of the read articles every time they click on an article. And to do that, we're going to use a custom action. So we go to the cart list component, and then we go to action, and we're going to create a new custom action, create new action. And this is going to be read article action. We can save it, and now we can edit it again. And what we're going to look for is whether they have access or not before they are taken to an upgrade screen. But before we do that, we're just going to create a counter that every time the user reads an article, we're going to increment the value of this column, the read articles, by 1. Okay, so let's go back to the action, edit action, and we could use an increment type of action, increment number, where we're going to add 1 to the read articles column under the users table, but we don't have access to that column here because the screen where we are adding this action is not the users table, it's the articles table. So we have to connect the users table with the articles table in order to be able to increment the value of the column, of the read article column inside the users table. So let me show you how we're going to do this really quickly. We go to the articles table, and we're going to create a template column, which is going to be called CUID for current user ID, so the currently logged in user ID, and this is going to be a template column, and we're simply going to add here, we don't have the ability to grab any data from the currently logged in user because we have not connected the users table with the Glide app. Okay, so let me show you how is this done. You see, if you go here under menu, by default, there's always a user profile tab, right? Now, it's not connected to anything. We need to connect it to the sheet with the users, okay? And that sheet has to have at least 3 columns, a name column, an email column, and an image column, which it does. And now we can start grabbing data from the currently logged in user from that specific table. That's very important to do, okay? So now, if we go back to this table, to the articles table, we'll be able to grab the currently logged in user ID. The problem is that the users table doesn't have a unique ID at this moment. So we could use the email if we wanted, but I like to create a unique identifier using the computed column called row ID. So if we go here and click on row ID, that is going to generate a column with unique identifiers for each of the rows, in this case, users, right? And that's where we're going to pull into the articles table in order to connect both the users and articles table using a relation column. So let me show you how it's done. Now we can go create the currently logged in user ID column, and it's going to be a template column. But guess what? Now when I click on the 3 dots, I have a new menu here that says user profile, which wasn't there before because we had to connect the user table to Glide before being able to see this. And now I can grab the row ID of the currently logged in user, and guess what? It appears here. With this, now we can create a relation column that connects the articles table with the users table. So we're going to do that. I'm going to call this user rel. And this is going to be a relation column that allows me to connect this currently logged in user ID with the user table's row ID. Okay, and there you go. Now we've created a connection. We need to do this in order to be able to update the users table from the articles table, because when we're on this screen, the articles screen, right, we only can access this table by default, the articles table. So if we want to modify anything that is on a different table, we have to create that relation, which we already created. Therefore, when we go to the cart list custom action, and I click here and I say increment number, now under row, I can select not just the row from the articles table, which is this item, but the new relation to the users table. And therefore, I can increment the column red articles by 1. Okay? So I click save. And what's going to happen right now, every time I click on an article, the value of the red articles column under the user table is going to increase each time I click on the article. So I'm going to click 1, 2, 3. If I go to the table, to the users table under the non-paid user, we can see that the red articles value now is 3. The problem is that nothing is happening except incrementing the counter. We want to actually access the article content and take the user to the upgrade screen if they've run out of free articles. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is go to the cards list. Then we're going to edit the action. And once we increment the value of the red article column, we're going to take the user to the detailed page of that article. Let's click save. And now you can see that when I click on the article, the counter will go up, but I get to see the article itself. And now we should be at 4. Correct. Perfect. Then the next thing we have to do is once we run out of articles, we have to take them to this screen, the upgrade screen here under paid plans. To do that, we just go back to the articles, click on the cart list. We're going to edit the read article action, and we're going to put a conditional statement that is going to look at under the user profile, has free articles left. If the value is 0, we have to take them to the upgrade tab. So we're going to go to tab, okay, and it's going to take them to the tab paid plans, okay. If they still have access, then we're going to do what we were doing before, which is going to increment the value of the red articles column and take them to the detail screen. All right, so we click save. The currently logged in user, the non-paid user, doesn't have access now because he has read more than 3 articles. So now when we click on any of the articles, we see that he's being taken to the upgrade page as we predicted. Now, if we log in as a different user, let's say this paid user that hasn't read any articles, you can see that the user can read up to 3 articles. And then on the 4th article, the user is taken to the upgrade page. The next step is to enable users to be able to purchase access, and based on whether they've paid or not and whether they still have access, in other words, their access hasn't expired, give them unlimited access to all the articles. For that, we have to click on any of the actual plans and we have to add a buy button. All right. And then we're going to customize the buy button to make sure that it has everything. So the name of the product, description, here could be this, and then the image, there's no image. The product ID is going to be, in this case, the upgrade ID, because we're going to use that value to calculate the number of months that the user has paid for. And the price is correct. We don't need the shipping address, and we can display the Stripe logo below the button. Now, in my case, I'm already connected with Stripe. And if you haven't, you have to connect with Stripe in order to be able to enable buy buttons. So if I click on the buy button, now the user could make the purchase. And then once the purchase is made, we'll be able to give them access by looking at the sales table. Now, the sales table is not created by default until a purchase is made. So we're going to create a test purchase using a fake credit card. So if you go to Stripe fake credit cards, you can copy and paste the values of any of these credit cards here, right? So I'm going to copy just the first one, 42, 42, 42, and I'm going to put that here. Okay, and then any month in the future, it's okay. And then any zip code, and as this is going to be a paid user, and I'm going to place the order. And then this is a test order, so there's no charge being made. Now, when I go to my Google Sheet, there is a new sheet that has been created, a new table called App Sales. It's here. And this is where all the transactions are being stored. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit to make sure it looks nice. And freeze the first row. Okay. And I don't need all these rows here. I like to clean tables so they look nice. All right. Just get rid of empty cells that are not needed. Okay. And finally, organize everything like this. And as you can see, it says it's a test purchase, right? And the amount is $19.99. I can change that to this kind of value. Perfect. So as you can see, everything has been stored. Now, there's one issue when you're using Google Sheets and perform transactions is that this table, the app sales table that is automatically generated by Glide, doesn't appear under the Glide data editor. As you can see, it's missing here, right? It's kind of like a hidden table. So in order for you to see this table, we have to do a little trick, which is basically we're going to duplicate this table and we're going to call it sales. And then what we're going to do is delete all the contents of the new table. And then we're going to use this formula. It's a filter formula, which you can copy. And it's going to pull all the data from the app sales table into the sales table. Okay, and you can see it's basically a copy. Now, this sales table does appear inside the Glide editor. Okay. If I refresh, you'll see how that new table appears under the admin table. And there it is. Now that we have the data, the transaction, we can give access to the user whose email matches the user email. Okay? So let's do that. What we need to do is go to the users table and connect the sales table with the users table using a relation column that is going to look for a match on the email address of the user here. So right now, the only user that has made a purchase is Jari Buri. So we have to match that email using a relation column. So we're going to do a relation column. We're going to call it sales rel relation column, and we're going to match the email of the user under the sales table for the purchaser email. And you can see now there's already one match. but we're going to do multiple because a user can renew their subscription several times. So that means that there could be several entries for the same user. Okay, there you go. So now we have a way to verify that a user has made a purchase. The next thing we need to do is to figure out if the user still has access. In other words, has his plan expired or not? And for that, we need to pull in the date of the purchase. So what we're going to do that right now is grab that using, let's say, date. We're going to call this date purchase last because we're going to grab the last time that they made the purchase. We're going to use a single value computed column for that. And we're going to grab the last time we find a match from the sales relation, right? And we're going to look at the date paid at, okay? So there you go. Now we have the date of the last time they paid, and now we have to find out how many months they paid for. So for that, we're going to duplicate this, and we're going to say plan months. And it's going to be the last value that matches, but instead of the pay, that is going to be the SKU, because on the SKU, we're actually storing the value of the months that they paid. Okay, it's just a little trick to do so. And then we need to calculate the expiry date. Luckily, the math column allows us to perform calculations between dates. So all we have to do is create a math column, which is going to be called plan expiry date, and it's going to be a math column. We're going to add to the date that they purchased for the last time, we're going to add the number of months that they paid for times 30. So now we have to do the replacements where X is going to be the date they purchased last, and Y is going to be the amount of months that they paid for, and we automatically get the expiry date. How simple is that? So they paid March 16th and the expiry date is April 15th. With this, now we can determine two things. One, whether they've paid or not, and the second, whether their plan has expired or not. So let's create two conditional columns to grab those two values, to calculate those two values. So has paid at least once, and we're going to look at we're going to use a conditional column, and it's going to look at the sales rail. So if there is any match, that means that the user has paid at least once. And if it's not empty, that means that they paid once because there's been a match with the sales table. Otherwise, it's 0, and we can see that, yes, that user has paid, and therefore we get a 1 for that user. And then we have to figure out if the plan has not expired, and for that we're going to create another conditional column, which we're going to call is not expired, and it's basically going to look at the plan expiry date. So it's going to be a conditional column, has a plan expiry date is here, and we're going to look that is after today. So if the expiry date is after today, that means that the user still has access. Otherwise, the user doesn't have access. Now, the great thing about having these values here as zeros and ones, basically binary options, is that we can perform calculations to determine if the user has access or not. Because the other thing we're going to look for is whether the user is an administrator. If the user is an administrator, they should always have access regardless of whether they paid or not. So we're going to create another conditional column, is admin, and it's going to be a conditional column where we're going to look at the level. So if the level of the user is admin, we're going to give that a value of 1, if not 0. And as we can see, there's only one administrator, the first user. And now we have another condition that we can look to determine whether the user has access to all the articles or not. Now what we're going to do is to create a math column. It's going to be called access math. And it's a math column where we're going to add A plus B plus C. And the replacements are going to be the binary values for has 3 articles left, it's not expired, and is admin. precision 1, we don't need group separator, done. So what we can see here is that the users should have access to all the articles as long as the value, the combined value of the summation of these three columns is greater than 0. Anytime it's 0, we don't give them access. Anytime it's bigger, so in this case, for example, the first user hasn't paid, and of course the expiry date doesn't apply to this user because he hasn't paid, but he is an administrator. Therefore, that is the combination of the three columns of the summation is greater than 0, so this user should have access. Then we have the final column, which is called has access, where we're going to simply look at whether the math is greater than 0 or not. So if it's greater than 0, the user has access, otherwise it doesn't have access. You may have noticed that we haven't used in our calculation the has paid column. That's because we're going to use this column to show a warning message for users that have paid but whose plan has expired. But for the overall access, we don't need the has paid column. We just need to know whether the current plan has expired or not. All right? Let's go back to our articles page and their cart list and their actions, because we need to edit the first condition that is going to decide whether we take the user to the upgrade page or not. In this case, it's just looking whether the user has any free articles left, but we also have to take into consideration whether the user has paid or not. And because we already calculated the overall access with the math column that we just created, then instead of looking at the has free articles left column, we're going to look at under the user profile, the has access column, which takes into consideration whether the user has paid or not, whether it's an administrator or not, and whether he or she has any free articles left. Okay? So now we click save. And if I logged in as the administrator, for example, right now, I can read as many articles as I want to, right? So I'm going to read, let's see how many we have done, maybe 5 right now. So if I go to the users table, the administrator has read 5 articles, which is more than the 3 articles. But guess what? Because I'm an administrator, I still have access, which means I have a 1 under the has access column. All right. Now, if my subscription has expired, so we can change that now. We could go to the user that has paid, right, which is this user. And the date of the last purchase was on March 16th. If we go to the app sales table. Now, if you want to modify anything for sales, you should do it under the app sales table, not under the sales table. Remember, this is a copy of the app sales table. So I'm just going to gray this out. It's a trick that I use to remind me not to touch this, right? Not to touch this table, right? So if I want to modify anything here, so let's say now I made the purchase in January, let's say January 1st, okay? And I only purchased 1 month, right? Therefore, my plan should have expired right now. I shouldn't have any access anymore. It's not updated yet, so let me just refresh the database. So now this should change to a 1 for January. And now under it's not expired is 0, which means it has expired, and therefore the access is 0. Okay, so now I'm a user that has paid, but whose access has expired. All right, so let me just go to the paid user. I think is the one whose plan had expired. All right, okay, so if we go to users, yeah, the third user had expired. Okay. Eventually, what I wanted to do is just basically have the different values, potential values for all different users, right? So if I wanted to replicate this user under the app sales table, I could do that. Let me just make sure that this user has not expired. So it's going to be, let's say, 15th. And this user is going to be the one that has expired, has this email address. So I can go to app sales and change it here. And now this user is going to be that. I'm just entering manually a purchase of somebody that has expired, so then we can play with the different users, right? So now if we refresh this, the paid users has not expired, so it should have access to all the plans, correct? But the paid expired user, when I refresh this, shouldn't have access to the articles anymore. But it has access because the user has 3 articles that he can access, but eventually he's going to run out of articles, which he did right now, or she did in this case, and then the user is taken to the upgrade page. Now, there's no indication that the plan has expired, so what we can do here is simply add an indicator showing that the plan has expired. So we need to modify this upgrade page really quickly. We're going to convert it into a detail page. We're going to delete all of that, and we're going to enter an inline list with the different plans. So we go to source, paid plans, and then under details, the details, and there you go. Perfect. And then what we can do here is add a hint, basically a warning, right? Where we're going to say plan expired. Okay, we're gonna put this here, and we're only going to show this, also the date that it expired. Why not, right? We can do that too as well. The date expiry, the plan expiry date. And we're only going to show this to users that have paid, but whose plan has expired. So to do that, we have to do under conditional visibility under option. And we're going to look at 2 columns. The has paid column has to be 1. In other words, they've paid, but the expiry, so the it's not expired, equals 0. All right. So this is basically only going to be shown to people that have paid, but whose plan has expired. So that way the user knows why they don't have any access anymore. All right. If it was any other type of user, like a non-paid user, they don't get that warning because they haven't ever paid in the past. But somebody has paid in the past does get that warning. So that takes care of all the logic to implement this paywall. And now all we need to do is publish the app. So we're going to click the publish button, and then we're going to select a URL. We could call it Glide Paywall, right? And there you go. Now we just can go to the app on the web and install it on our mobile device or access it from our desktop, and people will be able to access it. Now, one thing that I forgot to do is set the privacy. So I'm going to set the privacy to public with email and allow people to sign in with Google, with Gmail. And that way we'll be able to store how many times people have clicked on an article. Because if they don't create an account, we cannot store that data, right? So now if we sign in with Google, we'll be able to keep track of every user's behavior, right? So right now, this is a user that logs in for the first time. So the user will be able to see 3 articles. So that's 1, 2, 3 articles. And on the 4th one, they're taken to the paywall where they can purchase access. That is fantastic, bombastic. You just learned how to create an amazing paywall with Glide without coding. How cool is that? If you want to make a copy of this app, just go to grumo.com, Glide Paywall, and you'll be able to make a copy of this template so you can play with it. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.